Hi Newman. In this election, you have a choice between two approaches: carrying on as we always have done, or forging a fresh new path with new opportunities and new challenges. My name is Rowan Draper, and I'm standing to be your union president to lead you through the next academic year to unlock our SU so we're a union of all the talents. My Ready to Lead manifesto will address the structural and cultural problems within our union by engaging those hard to reach members, giving them an access all areas pass to become the next generation of our SU so that our exec no longer looks like the cast of Othello year in, year out. If you haven't read my manifesto, it's available at facebook.com/Rowan for President. Over the course of this question time, I hope to convince you not only that my analysis of the situation the SU faces is correct, but also the solutions I propose, the experience I've gained and the skills I possess will aid me as your next SU president to deliver a union that is fit for our rich and diverse community.
I'm going to go straight into question one. We're going to go to Rowan first with the question. And it's a very straightforward question. It's a question we've asked all candidates so far in this series. What makes you think that you'd be the best candidate for the role? You have 1 minute.
I could tell you how I was the chair of Student Forum last year and introduced reporting on the strategic plan. I could tell you how as an undergrad I served as sports officer for 2 years. I could tell you how last year I was shortlisted for course rep of the year. I could tell you how I run my own business. I could tell you I was elected the youngest councillor to be deputy mayor in my local authority. I could tell you I was nationally shortlisted for Young Councillor of the Year in 2014. I could tell you I was promoted to the opposition front bench with responsibility for managing the council's finance. But none of that really matters. The reason why my candidacy stands apart in this election is my manifesto: campaigning against hidden course costs, expanding the SU support offer, promoting postgraduates, prioritising mental health to create a mental health charter with the university, and creating a liberation leadership course to unlock specific groups within our community so we're a union of all the talents. This is why on Monday, when voting opens, I want you to put your trust in me and give me your first preference vote for president.
Question. There's been a lot of mention of the engagement deficit. This is not a new thing. There's been lots of staff and officers who have tried to tackle this before, and there's been a particular commitment over last year with the BAME Student Experience Panel. But there is a point, an opinion from students that creating divisive and label policy is not the answer to resolving this. So with all of that in mind, and without stating the obvious or telling you going out to suck eggs, how do you intend to raise engagement of all students at Newman rather than providing broad statements and overuse of labels and buzzwords?
Well, first of all, I think that it's important to say that I reject the premise of the question. The problem that students' unions across the sector have with engaging underrepresented or minority groups is because they continue to have this aspect or promotion of, well, we're going to talk to all students. But the reality is that when we are trying as business people, when we're trying to convert particular customers, we know who we're talking about. We are talking to a section of our community, because if we try and advertise everything we do, we're planning to fail. So the first thing that I would say in my approach is going to be to call out those issues. If we've got an underrepresentation of disabled students, we need to look at the access reasons why that is. If we don't have a majority or we don't have enough mature students, Newman's population is mature 1 in 3. So why are we not converting? Like, it should be simple. So the things that I will do is target my focus.
The question, it's been widely reported that this year there's no BAME candidates for the president role and no women for any full-time officer role. On the back of this, we're seeing some great ally campaigns from our candidates with diversity at the forefront of their priorities. There is a view from some students that a true ally would stand in the election to resign to pave the way for a woman or a student of BAME to stand in a by-election. What are your thoughts on this?
I don't think that that's what a true ally would do. Allies don't leave you to fight alone. Allies stand up and they fight with you and for their neighbours, regardless of the cost, because it's the right thing to do. I would love for the union to elect a president that was a woman or a person of colour, but we have to be pragmatic about this. Change doesn't come quickly, and it doesn't come because we want to. Change comes from hard work, building relationships, organising in communities, and relentless pressure until we realise our aspirations. If I was elected president and resigned, what was going to change? If I'm elected your next president, I will have the platform and an ironclad mandate to deliver Newman's first liberation leadership course. We will engage with underrepresented groups, we'll improve skills and knowledge of potential candidates, we'll build networks for candidates to learn from. We will change the face of the union if you elect me as your next union president.
With Rowan, and this question is about balancing the professional understanding and experience of staff against the president being the strategic lead of the union and voice of students democratically elected. So when you're elected as president, you're also chair of the board of trustees. This means that you're chair of the board that sets the strategy and governance and gives the general manager, myself, my delegated authority and sets the targets for the year. So how do you intend on balancing that role with the day-to-day role of the president, and how will you work out any conflicts with staff that may arise given that you don't directly manage any of the staff? We'll go to Rowan first.
Well, I think first of all, it's about having regular meetings with myself as the chair or president and the general manager, which is yourself, Ryan. I think the way that I want to deal with it is to be a proactive officer, so that people can approach their concerns with me, because I think that problems get out of hand when they're not nipped in the bud. And I think that the way that I want to deal with it is by showing leadership to say what's acceptable, what I expect from my staff, and having the executive committee setting that plan from day one, July 1st. We have set a plan that we are going to deliver, and then give to you as the general manager and say, this is what we want delivered. And that's how I want to go about it. So building and maintaining strong working relationships, nipping problems in the bud before they become a problem, and that's what I have to say.
Finally, on to Rowan. So student voices are heard across the course rep system, motions and feedback in forums and the AGM, and through the executive go out and talk to students. How do you ensure that the union and its staff are recording all of the data, and how are you personally going to ensure that all feedback is acted on and doesn't just sit in our systems?
Okay, so to take it into two parts, we've got the recording data. So obviously, from a staff perspective, that's going to be the responsibility of the general manager to make sure that the staff are doing the job that they're employed to do. From an exec point of view, that's my responsibility to make sure that the team is dealing with the processes and systems in place. So as Chris has explained, it's now being logged into a spreadsheet, and the staff are responsible for that. And then that comes and should come to an executive committee for us to discuss and respond to. When feedback's being acted on, when it's possible to do so and it's not sensitive or confidential, then we should be communicating. We should be using our social media platforms, blogs, podcasts, videos to report on what actions are actually happening. I agree with Chris that the website needs to be more part of our strategy, because ultimately it is underutilised at the moment.
So, Rowan, there's been much talk from candidates about overhauling the course rep system, and there's a danger there of not actually doing an overhaul, but replacing a course rep system with a course rep system. So what we want to know is, what do you think is positive about the course rep system, and how will you build on that to ensure that student feedback is tracked, acted upon, and communicated to the Newman community as best practice?
Well, one of the positives that I think that exists with the course rep system is that those course reps who put their time in and do the work, engaging with lecturers and other staff members, they're gaining valuable experience that when they come to go to their first interview after they've graduated, they've actually got something that they can talk about, that they've actually done and learned skills from. So that would be my greatest positive with the course rep system at the moment. With regards to feedback, again, we need to be making sure that the communication loop is two-way. during the campaign, I've spoken to a number of individuals who've said that it seems to be going up to the top and then not coming back. That's for them to say. I'm just acknowledging that people feel that way. So I want to make sure that we have a truly two-way course rep system, so that what we're actually doing and saying as a union is being fed back to those course reps.
So historically, and due to its size, Newman SU relied heavily on full-time officers to work operationally as staff members. We now have 4 supporting staff members, which frees up the time for officers to really be and act like elected officers without getting caught up in the administrative work. So with this in mind, what do you see as important to the role, and what would students find you doing on a day-to-day basis now there is less need for you to be sat behind a desk?
Okay, so effectively what I want to do is building those relationships and maintaining relationships, not only with the staff in the university, not within the union, but really having a really good grasp of being able to talk to the Vice Chancellor or the head of faculty or an associate dean or the head of a department, because when it comes to conflict that our students are going to have potentially in their course, the best way to be able to resolve that is to have decent working relationships. So one thing is going to be in meetings with staff members. The second thing is about running events and initiatives, like for example the Liberation Leadership course. So my time's going to be spent on bringing people together, whether from both the student body and from outside, because I think that when we look at Newman as being the only way to do things, that's when we lose out.
Rowan, you as president, you will sit on some of the most important university committees, including University Council, as a full member. How do you vision your relationship with the university, and how would you ensure that you're engaging in the meetings and that your opinion is taken seriously?
Okay, well, the way that I want to the way that I want to portray myself as an SU president is to be a constructive friend of the university, which means holding them to account when they've got things wrong and when I think that they've got things wrong. But it's also about being measured and pragmatic and being led by evidence. Obviously, one of the things that I talked about is maintaining relationships with staff, which is really important to build alliances for the future, so that when we're actually asking for things and saying that we don't want certain things, then we've actually got people who are ready and willing to support us. But I think that the most important thing is about fighting where we can win and not just picking fights for the sake of it. The kind of person that I am is always going to read the agenda, always going to be prepared to go to a meeting, always going to be speaking to people before the meeting happens to make sure that I'm in the best position to advocate for the people I represent.
So, Rowan, the president role also chairs the executive committee. Do you see yourself managing the team or allowing them the ability to grow and be accountable for their own actions, and how would this work?
Ultimately, they are going to be held to account for what they do. My role is going to be to help support them. It's going to be to know, having had 2 years of experience as a part-time officer, to know the traps that part-time officers fall into when we come in with lofty promises, but then when we get to deadline day, those kind of activities kind of reduce. So what I want to do is be a proactive friend, a proactive support, but I also want to defend my part-time officers when it comes to scrutiny, when it's unfair, because I think that there's a really big problem that students and part-time officers have, is knowing where the line is. 1 in 4 of our students will suffer from mental health, and when we take that onto the exec, there are 8 students, so at least 2 of our students are going to suffer from mental health issues. And what I want to be able to do is to use my experience and my skills to make sure that that scrutiny is fair and balanced.
So, although we have an equality and campaigns officer, in theory, all campaigns should have the president of the SU spearheading them and being the face of student voice and empowerment. So what will you do to ensure that you are the change maker, the voice and the vision of students? And will you put yourself on the front line of student campaigns?
The simple answer is yes. If I'm elected as your next union president, I expect to be the campaigner in chief when it comes to the union's campaigns. I want to be playing a supportive role to equalities and campaigns, because if I'm honest, I don't understand and I don't agree with it being considered as part of activities. It is clearly representation. So when we're talking about domestic violence that students can suffer, when we're talking about stress that students will suffer, when we're talking about the issues with underrepresentation, when we're talking about the black attainment gap, when we're talking about mature students leaving university, these are all things that I believe as the front line, the leader of the exec and the face of the union, I will bring to be like any other president hasn't been before, because I think that they often get too high up in the office and that's it.
Chair of the Board of Trustees, how will you ensure that your decision making is impartial?
So the first thing that I would say is that when it comes to voting on issues that come to the trustee board, I'm going to be led by evidence. I think for those students who were here last year, they'll know that I chaired the AGM, the largest turnout ever, votes of no confidence, motions about taking on new services. Throughout that, I've had nothing but good comments about how I chaired that impartially, both from students and from staff. I've also got experience chairing a charity, so this isn't new to me in that sense. And what I want to make sure is that as the chair of trustees, when it comes to a trustees meeting, we're making actions rather than just talking about things, because meetings at the moment, they can so easily become just sessions where people just want to get out gripes. And what we need to be doing is having laser focus, making sure that we're focusing on the issues that matter and making decisions and taking actions forward.
So, Rowan, one of the biggest criticisms of the union at the moment is that it can feel a little cliquey, where students outside of that engagement circle find it difficult to interact with us. Also, previous executive committees have found it difficult speaking to new students as part, and they go out and talk to students. So how do you intend to change this view of the Students' Union through your role, and what commitments will you take to ensure that you are really speaking and, more importantly, listening to students rather than having a token 5 minutes disturbing students in their private time?
Okay, well, I think the first thing that we can do is put on record that it is. The evidence demonstrates that it is, and we need to be guided by evidence. The NUS diagnostics report in 2015 showed that the union was failing, and whilst it's improved in some areas, there are still others that require change. 2 areas that I think that we can improve this is at a student level and a staff level. At a student level, we need to have engagement with those hard to reach students with an action plan in place. As officers, we're also going to need to hold each other to account, because as candidates, we're going to be able to sit here and say that we're going to talk to students, but when it comes down to it, we're going to deliver the same old once we're elected. At a staff level, we need to go beyond our comfort zones, and we need to recruit members with fresh ideas to revitalise our union, but not only when it's an election time. This is why I've pledged in my manifesto to create a liberation leadership course, so we can produce the role models throughout the union for future students to change the face of our union for the better.